Good morning, everybody. Good morning and welcome to the Apprenticeship Diversity and Social Mobility Forum. So generally can't believe it's the fourth one. To think that it was just an idea during lockdown last year, and by the end of today, across all the forums, we would have heard from 24 senior leaders across business, the government, many industries represented within the apprenticeship sector, all with the aim of shaping the conversation around apprenticeship diversity and social mobility. It's quite incredible to see this and the conversation still moving in a somewhat positive direction. Before I begin, could I ask all attendees to turn the camera and microphones off to avoid any interference with the forum and recording? So yes, it will be recorded. And now that this forum in particular has been brought to you by the BAME Apprenticeship Clients. It's a digital platform that builds workplaces to promote apprenticeship diversity. Through our platform, it's our ambition to educate workforces on Black, Asian, minority ethnic representation, engage with the BAME communities, and subsequently recruit from them communities. We want workplaces to be a place where you not only recruit underrepresented talent, but build a culture where they can thrive. Now, don't forget, you can share your insights, thoughts on social media using the hashtag ADSMF and tag BAMEAAUK. Again, quick reminder, keep your cameras off and microphones off. And if you have any questions during these to the speakers, please use the chat function as we'll get as many across to them as possible. It's important to mention that this forum has had some backing. The first is Mindful Education, who specialize in creating media-rich professional courses and apprenticeships, setting a new standard in digital delivery. And the second is the City and Guilds Foundation, which is part of the City and Guilds Group, which has a specific focus on high-impact social investment, recognition and advocacy programs. And last but by no means least is the Social Mobility Commission, who are an advisory non-departmental public body sponsored by the Cabinet Office. So if we were to cast our minds back to April of this year and the forum about investing in diversity and social mobility, and we made it clear that it was about the role, proper investment, money, we're talking about money and that what they can make. We got to hear from policy, from a policy level, we got to hear from an employer level, we got to hear from a learning provider level on why it's important, but to hear the on-ground impact that it's had, it has made goes to show how building an ecosystem around where social mobility can happen, driven by solid investment, can create the change that we need to see. So where does technology come into this? And could technology be a force for good? And does technology hold a solution for diversity and social mobility? To discuss this, we have some incredible speakers joining us today. Firstly, Sir Ken Olisa, founder and chairman of Restoration Partners. Sir Ken has had an illustrious career in technology, beginning at IBM, founding the technology merchant bank Integnum, which went on to becoming a listed company. And I'm probably going to be doing an injustice to the full breadth and depth of Sir Ken's career, as there's so much to add. But other organizations Sir Ken has been part of include Thomson Reuters, Interswitch, Shaw Trust, and on the board of Huawei. Sir Ken was voted the most powerful British Black person in 2016, and he was knighted in 2018 by Her Majesty the Queen, and he is the current president of London Youth. Next, we have Lord Jim Knight, a former UK government minister and MP, the director of Suklaa, who provides services related to technology and education and learning. For many years, Lord Knight has been the Chief Education External Officer at TES Global, and in over 6 years co-founded the TES Institute in 2014, which is now the 5th largest qualifier of teachers in England. He also managed the TES Resources, a global teacher community of 13.5 million users. And he also chairs the TES Global Advisory Board, sits on the Global Advisory for BET, and is the chair of the Digital Poverty Alliance. Next, we have Tamsin Dewhurst, who is the founder and CEO of Uptree. So Uptree has not only been designed as a professional careers platform and network for young people to get started in the world of work, but it also helps them find work experience and apprenticeships, and more importantly, democratizing entire careers process. And this has won Tamsin a lot of awards, including the Founder of the Year Award, being the runner-up in the Diversity World Skills UK Diversity Network of the Year Award, and also winner of the Women in IT Employer Award. Last but by no means least, we have Raj Kumaran, who is Director of Education and Partnerships at Mindful Education. And we are immensely thankful to Raj and Mindful Education for backing and sponsoring this forum. So Raj began his career as a software engineer before becoming Director of Education at St. Patrick's College, International College for nearly 16 years. And in 2015, Raj went on to co-found Mindful Education. So welcome to my panelists. So Ken, I wanted to begin with yourself. And it's quite important to kind of get a bit of a backstory here. So Ken, how did you go from a small two-bedroom house in Nottingham to having a company listed on the stock exchange, voted the most influential Black person in the UK, and also regularly spotted with the royal family?
The answer to that question, I think, in the 21st century now, is to acknowledge that we are facing in the UK two opposed narratives. One says it is actually impossible to get on in this country if you come from a certain background, and that certain background is quite broad, so it's background plural. And the other one says, no, this is the land of opportunity. The British dream is something which is available to everybody who's got who essentially has got the drive and the motivation to make that happen. And I every day I read more and more and more of the dividing argument. It's clear from my backstory, as you call it, which side of the argument I'm on. But it's quite important, therefore, to just unpack a little bit and therefore answer your question. How did I end up where I am? Well, let's do the negative backstory. Single parent family, free school meals, crappy house with an outside lavatory, no inside bathroom, etc., state educated, etc., etc. That's one narrative. You very generously did the other narrative in my introduction. So I clearly have proved that it's possible to come from that kind of background and be able to get to do the sorts of things that I do today. Therefore, the big question is, and it was the question you posed, which is, so why or how? Well, a very dear friend of mine, Michael Boda, once said, well, if Ken can do it, anybody can. And I think, although it was deeply insulting at the time, it is quite an important point, because in our country, there are so many opportunities. And what has not to happen is for people to hold themselves back or allow other people to hold them back. So I will distill the answer to your question into two things. Progressively over my life, I followed my heart and not my head. If I thought I could do something, I wanted to have a go at it, I would have a go at it. I wouldn't allow my head to say, well, it's not really for people like you, your kind of background, etc., etc., etc. And my heart has won out most times throughout. Now, I haven't got everything I've gone for by a very large margin. So if you were to draw the line of my life from growing up in that house in Nottingham to where I am today, it looks like that, even though it's rather a good place to be at the moment. And people have to be able to cope with the downs, and I've had some amazing downs as well as the ups, and I have had some amazing ups. So the short answer to your question is I've been lucky enough to follow my heart and not my head, and the rest of those experiences then were fuel for making that happen.
I think that's quite a nice link to your career as well. So your career has had been embedded with technology. And so particularly throughout your career and in recent years, you've been involved with youth development organizations, particularly founding the Elite Foundation and becoming the president of London Youth. Growing on from your experiences and your experience in education and also in technology, how has education and development of young people been shaped through the changing landscape of technology?
Well, can I hijack two of the words you've used there? One is education. You know, I'm still learning. I still read books. I still study things. I still investigate. I'm still interested in learning. I'm still astonished to meet people who don't know very basic things that I either learned at school or learned relatively early, early on in my life. Too many people I observe close down their learning. They see somehow that education was something to be resisted as opposed to be something to be enjoyed. I had some brilliant teachers. I had some really bad teachers, but that wasn't the point. I wasn't there for them. I was there to learn. I was there to feed my head and my heart, as I said. So it's impossible to overstate how important education is, and remind everybody it goes on until your last breath. We're always learning. So people that cut themselves off from learning, they need to cut themselves back on again. I don't want to complain about them. They just need to flick that switch. And I remember some of the profound lessons I learned all those years ago. I come from Nottingham, as you said, and I remember we were taken on a bus. I was at a grammar school. We were taken on a bus out to see a mine, and we went to this mine and we met miners. We put miners' hats on. We got in a cage. We went down into the bowels of the earth. It was horrible. It was really horrible. It was scary. And I remember thinking, so people have to, there must be a better way of doing this than people risking their lives and livelihoods to do it. And as we came back up again, I remember thinking, if I'm ever involved with mines or mining, I think I'd like to be the owner, because I see them with the Jaguars and the dining room and everything, and not a worker. And ironically, many years later, I was on the board of a public company in the UK with lots of mines in Kazakhstan. So those formative moments in one's education are really key, and one should will really drink deep of that opportunity. So the first thing I would say is that. The second one is that I have been seriously privileged that lots of people have gone out of their way to help me. So I can remember as a small child, and one of the only people of colour in Nottingham, and certainly the only one where I lived. So I wasn't only the only black person that most people had ever seen in the district where I grew up, but I was also almost the only black person I'd ever seen. So it was a very different environment then, and I was an object of interest for lots of people. They formed views about me, but nevertheless, parent and me, and they really went out of their way. And as I look back over my life, I can say lots of people have gone out of their way to help me, and I haven't rejected it. So back to that narrative point I was making, one of the things that depresses me is too many people see opportunities as a threat and won't take them because they somehow suspect a plot, as opposed to seeing an opportunity. Where am I going with all of that? I think learning, skills, capabilities, follow your heart is the engine which allows us to go to places that we can't imagine as young people. Finish it all off. I spent my time in IT, as you say, but I got into IT in my gap year between school and university, having had a variety of other jobs, which included painting lavatories, car washing, working in a shop, etc. So I got lots of opportunity to discover alternatives before lighting on IT. IT is the most wonderful of industries because we are hugely starved of talent. There are job applications far outnumber the number of people applying for jobs. So if someone's thinking about a career now as a young person, a technical background, going to one of the burgeoning technical industries is a no-brainer. If they've got the capacity, that's where they should be going. And remember, you might be an artist. You can still get a job in IT. Games design is an art, not a technical activity. If you're going to, if you are a creative person, you can get a job in the environmental sciences, because working out how people work so that they would nudge and change their behaviors is a key part of the environmental science piece. So you don't have to be a scientist or a technologist to get with one of the growing sectors within industry. But it makes a lot more sense to be doing that than to letting yourself into something which is a flatlining industry where there's a surfeit of people applying for jobs and the opportunities are therefore limited. So follow your heart, not your head. Accept the kindness of strangers and keep learning.
And technology, was technology a role in shaping that journey for you?
Very much so. I'm embarrassed to say that it wasn't a great Ken strategic decision to go into tech. In my sixth form, we were given an option on a Friday afternoon. We could either go cross-country running, or we could go to Nottingham University, the local university, and learn computer coding. I had no idea what computer coding was, but I knew it didn't involve wet, rain, communal showers, etc., etc., and therefore was deeply more attractive. So I went off to learn computer coding, and a career loomed. So again, it's about thinking things through and looking for opportunities. But IT has been very good to me, and I like to think I've done some good for it.
So I think this is a nice pathway into bringing in Lord Knight. So Lord Knight, you are a former cabinet minister, without breaking a sweat saying that. And you've been and seen some major developments in education skills, worked in private and non-profit sectors. I want to pose that last question to yourself. How has education and development of young people been shaped through the changing landscape of technology?
Well, if you go back almost to the beginnings of history, technology impacts education. You know, famously in the ancient Greeks, I think Socrates railed against the new technology of writing and reading because it dumbed down education, because it, you know, people didn't have to remember things anymore because they could write them down. And you know, we see that attitude to change in education brought about by technology as something that rolls on and on. I think being more up to date, more recently, you know, Ken talked about how important it is to see education as being something that carries on to your last breath, and I totally agree with it. And my sense is that schooling has fallen behind education, in that most people, most young people, have done lots of learning using technology, but it's not normally been at school. You know, outside of school time, on their mobiles, on their laptops, on, you know, assuming that they've got access to those things, they've, you know, everyone, yeah, we're all born learners, we're natural learners. That's what every child, as soon as they come out of the womb, does. And so you know, the informal learning that has been facilitated by technology has been extraordinary and fantastic. It's taken a pandemic for the school system to shift along the adoption curve of technology sufficiently for us now to be able to say with some confidence, yeah, actually, technology looks as if it's going to be properly embedded in the way that we teach and the way that we learn. And we've still got some work to do on that. We've still got some work around teacher training and making sure that teachers are taught the pedagogy, you know, the teaching practice as to how you can use technology well, as opposed to just trying to replicate the face-to-face pedagogy online, which is never going to be as good as face-to-face. Whereas, you know, you can do some things differently in ways that are sort of inconceivable using technology. And technology can support teachers and help them with some of the workload pressures that are a real stress at a time of huge stress for teachers. So, yeah, we've got more work to do, but I think we've crossed the Rubicon, if you like. And we will now see schooling catch up with where kind of informal learning had got to in young people's lives using technology.
I think you kind of touched on it quite nicely when you spoke about the pandemic and how that sort of shaped the landscape. And I think one important topic that came up last year was digital poverty. Digital poverty made the headlines late last year, particularly during the second lockdown. And you know, you are part of the you're chair of the Digital Poverty Alliance. So do you feel that governments and institutions have gone far enough to ensure the impact of digital poverty has been mitigated? And if not, what could they be doing to mitigate the process of digital poverty?
There is still more to be done. And so government needs to keep its foot on the gas on this. You know, Ofcom published some data at the end of last year. So, you know, there's more updating to be done. But that said, 3% of children couldn't access any learning during lockdown because of lack of access. Now, 3% sounds like a very small percentage. But if we think about, you know, an average secondary school in this country probably is a 3-form or a 4-form entry school. So that means that there's 3, 4, 5 kids in every year group in a secondary school who couldn't do any learning. And they will, by definition, be the most disadvantaged children in that school. So they will be further behind in their learning and more isolated because yeah, it's not just the cognitive development, the academic learning, it's also the social and emotional development of children that we should be concerned about in respect of digital poverty. And the Ofcom data also said that when you looked at it as a whole, 1 in 4 children were constrained in their learning because of a lack of digital access. Because, you know, you might have, you know, you've got a reasonable number where the only access that happens is through a mobile phone. You'd have a reasonable number of families having to choose between food or data because of the cost of connectivity for some things. You know, you would have families where if you've only got 1 device and you've got 4 children, which child is going to get access to the device for the learning and which isn't. And these are all significant issues, and we need to go further. And in a couple of hours, I will be in the House of Lords asking ministers questions about access to broadband for children for learning, because we have to keep the pressure on, because there still is more to be done.
Yeah, and it's quite an interesting point you make about how broadband, what we did see was companies stepping up and giving free access to internet. What we don't realize is there is you mentioned the 3%, but the 3% make up, if you look at those who are then furthest away from the education system, that 3% becomes a bigger number. Because if we're talking about a certain, it then becomes 30 to 40% of a particular. If we then go by geographical location, then we then see that number becomes even more bigger because of lack of access to the tools and resources they need to access that. When is that House of Lords meeting, did you say?
Well, we have questions every day to ministers, and at 1 o'clock today, we have questions to ministers, and this is, I think, the third question. So that's likely to be at about 1:30 today.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Tamsin, I want to bring you in. I think it's a good point, because I think you're a former teacher, and you've been there on the ground with young people, and now you're the founder of Uptree. You're all about bridging the gap between young people and prospective employment through technology. So how does Uptree achieve this?
Thanks, I was stuck on mute, thank you. Yeah, great. So Uptree is a careers platform and a professional network connecting young people and employers, and our mission is to democratize careers education and access to work experience. It's a really good question, but I founded Uptree 6 years ago. My experience is that being a teacher in a secondary school, so in London, I was previously head of geography. I taught for 5 years. And I really enjoy teaching, but I just saw really clearly that young people really had an unequal access to careers education and work experience opportunity. It was clearly really unfair, and especially for young people from low socioeconomic backgrounds. So I wanted to kind of solve this issue at scale, make it more equal across the UK, and founded Uptree to kind of solve this issue. And I really believe in a level playing field where every young person has access to that opportunity base to progress their career, not based on like connections and who they know, which kind of is a lot of the case in the UK, unfortunately, but more on kind of their potential and background. They're just more on their potential. So really sort of reaching their goals and believing in themselves to be able to take those next steps that they can to achieve. And that's what we're trying to do at Uptree. So we partner with about 28 at the moment global businesses from kind of JP Morgan, big IBM as well, actually, JP Morgan, KPMG, and really helping those companies to kind of build programs that inspire, attract, and hire a future workforce that's more representative of the communities in which they operate in. And we partner with UK secondary schools across the UK. We create online learning content to develop programs for the young people to increase their awareness of what careers are available, but also to provide them with like role models and professional connections, and actually through technology, but have that kind of face-to-face interactions with professionals to really gain the skills that they need to be successful. And for us, it's really important to kind of build on those two issues, around access to careers awareness and like what options young people can have in their career, having that from an earlier age so that all young people have access to that information. And then secondly, like building on those soft skills, how to apply to jobs and believing in themselves and having the confidence to say, I can achieve this, I've got the potential, and I know what steps I need to take now to be able to achieve my goal. So yeah, that's kind of what we're working on at Uptree, reaching schools across the UK. We have kind of Edtech platform, but we also have our communities of employers, partners, school partners and students across the UK. So it's that kind of hybrid of like using tech, but also lots of human interactions as well to make that work, to sort of build this access the world of work in a more equal way for all young people. That's kind of our mission.
You mentioned the word, before I get to my next question, you mentioned the word potential. Is technology a good segue to, or a good bridge to allow people to explore their potential?
I think it needs to be like a hybrid approach. Everyone is different and everyone comes from different backgrounds, and some people need more support than others, and that needs to be maybe more personalized. So yeah, but technology definitely in a sense of making sure that we've got content from different industries, like standardizing that in terms of what industries are available, what careers young people can take, and then bridging that gap, providing where people need that extra support, where can we provide with role models, where can we get young people speaking to professionals, where can they meet, go into the place of work. And it's just that opening your eyes to what's available. It's quite hard to sort of replicate that online, but definitely I think there's some things that we can do with technology support.
And you speak quite openly on democratizing work experience, which is such a big thing quite recently because of the pandemic. I mean, how has the pandemic impacted young people in their career aspirations, and particularly through technology? Has that been a positive driver to address this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think like negatively, and ultimately, we've read a lot in the news. Schools being closed to students, they spent a long periods of time like out of education. And I know recently Department for Education have said that, by autumn 2020, there was about 2.5 months of lost learning, particularly in areas where schools have high free school meals, so students from low socioeconomic backgrounds. And in secondary schools, I think it was said that sort of the learning losses are 50% higher for the students from low socioeconomic background. So there's clearly an inequality there in terms of learning being lost, with particularly impacting students from low socioeconomic backgrounds. But, all of that then therefore has a sort of direct impact on things outside of the curriculum. So it's like that loss of learning is the core subject. And as a result, anything extra, like all the careers advice, all the guidance, any activities relating to that, they become less of a priority for those schools because they've just got to get those lessons in. They're just kind of driving towards that short-term goals. And we really experienced that at Uptree. We had to adapt all of our face-to-face activity to online pretty quickly, obviously, during March last year. And many schools just cancelled our work because they were focusing, on those lessons. And as a result, those careers aspiration stuff just kind of pushed to the side. But yeah, positively, like we did see an increase in kind of that direct Lord Jim Knight, you were talking about this, but like there was definitely an increase in student engagement in careers. And students, even though schools were closed, like students having more time at home to kind of look ahead to their future. We saw a rise in activity and demand for online learning. Online work experience sessions were being hosted, taster sessions with employers, which is all really positive. And at Uptree, we developed this kind of summer of learning last year to like a course to support those students on that journey from education to employment, but all being online. That online learning was really great, and it enabled us to meet students that we wouldn't otherwise have been able to reach, such as, UK cold spots, hard to reach areas, more disadvantaged areas of the UK. We were able to reach them through technology, and they could access our online learning courses, whereas before we might not have had access to get presenters out to their schools because they were too far out in cold spots, or those students might not have been able to travel into those offices where we were running work experience days face to face because of that journey time and that cost of travel and the parents being at work and things like that. So it has kind of helped us in that sense. However, I think there's definitely an issue still with all of this in terms of kind of the lack of human interaction and human connections for young people as a result of the pandemic. And, just doing a lot of kind of technology like broadcasting type events, like webinars for young people, doesn't really solve the issue when we think down to kind of what are the real causes of young people from low socioeconomic backgrounds not realizing their potential. I feel personally that human interaction is so important. And a lot of what technology has done through the pandemic is like broadcast careers advice and things like that, but it's not really getting to the root of the issue, where young people need to have that face-to-face and role models and get inspired to build their confidence and to understand that they can do this and they have got the potential to achieve. And Zoom fatigue is like a real thing. I've definitely suffered from it myself. And young people have certainly seen this. Mental health issues have gone up. And we already talked about digital poverty, but that's clearly still like a massive issue for young people, not having that good technology equipment in their household or access to Wi-Fi and things like that. So I just think for me, like with Uptree and our values, even though we're a tech platform, for us, like one of our values is humans before technology. And we really tried to remain strong to this throughout the pandemic. So rather than taking like a mass student approach for kind of work experience, we really care about, you know, keeping our work experience events quite small, making them interactive, building on those employability skills, and still doing it at scale, like trying to do a lot of this stuff, but really trying to give those young people, particularly those from low socioeconomic backgrounds, like that personalized feedback approach, and selecting students for those events based on applications so that they understand what it is like to apply for a job in the future, and they get that feedback, they feel confident that they've been successful onto a program, and they can take those next steps towards their goals. So yeah, hopefully that's quite a long-winded answer.
Yeah,
but,
no, I think importantly, where this sort of leads towards is what the topic of the future of work is, and I think this is a good point to bring in, Raj, because kind of switching away from young people to those who are in work, and you know, Mindful Education is an award-winning edtech company. Raj, what has the impact of being an edtech company been on the future of work? So for those who don't know what we mean by the future of work, is it essentially how the future of work has changed, whether we've got hybrid models, and how obviously technology has played a role in how work is being shaped and people are working from a day-to-day basis. So Raj, welcome, and yeah, to yourself, I mean, what has the impact of being an edtech company been for the future of work?
I think having been an edtech company, we've always thought that remote working was possible, and we could all work from wherever we liked, whether it was on a beach or in the office, whatever the preference was for individuals to perform at their optimal best. So as you know, Lord Knight said earlier, the pandemic has actually brought forward the future. So the future is already here as far as we are concerned, in that we have been quite seamlessly working ever since the lockdown was announced. Obviously, there was the initial hassle of having to set everyone up with the infrastructure, the kit, and everything else that was necessary. But it was a challenging time, but I think we have really moved forward into working from home, and everyone's sort of doing well. And remembering that our nature of work is actually to upskill and train other people. And so it's nicely sort of come into us leading by example, by as though it was taught with the pandemic bringing all of that forward. So working from home has been, in that sense, I think, the flexibility that it brings, as well as the family life balance that we are all talking about. So if you take away the commute, the hassle and bustle of jumping on a tube, tube strikes, signal failures, and all of that has meant that we are using our space and time more efficiently and effectively, and maximizing resources that we have. So that efficiency gains, cost savings, and the family life balance, which we're all able to enjoy a bit more of from working from home. So I think that's our big takeaway.
But importantly, I think my next question to yourself would be around the diversity and particularly underrepresented talent. Does EdTech help or hinder the progress of people in work from minority or underrepresented groups?
Good question, but I think there are two key things there. There is whether it helps people in work or into work. I think there's a lot of people about how many job changes people go through these days in the model. It's not a job for life. So there are people always looking to upskill, retrain, change skills or careers, etc. As with the times, as opportunities change and as technology plays an increasing part. Now, one of the key aspects of this is that take away the digital poverty element, take away the infrastructure element, take away the fake news and misinformation element that technology has rather enabled, sadly. But the positive gains are plenty. I think when you talk about a minority, the reason somebody is a minority might mean that there are several barriers to them in terms of retraining and upskilling opportunities. So, for example, if in a minority setting, if somebody was not confident with their language, their intellectual ability, or their social circumstances forbid them from participating in training or education, mainly due to their social circumstances or work commitments and otherwise. So technology has that element of on-demand learning where information may be accessed, training may be accessed at a time and place that suits them best. And if this was available across multiple platforms, be it smartphones, tablets, or computers, then it is certainly something that can help overcome barriers. And this could be, with a 24/7 society, often where do you find the time to go and train or upskill? So the reason we set a mindful was going by the Aristotle quote, the roots of education are bitter, but the fruit is sweet, they say. So using technology, media, and everything else in the modern world, we want to make the roots taste a bit better. So in that sense, I think we want to give that independent space, the time and space for people to experiment, trial and error, make the mistakes, build confidence, and for them to be able to then therefore participate more actively in the learning and training sphere, basically.
One of the key sort of thing that just come to my mind was the fact that through Edtech, it's increasing access for people who may not have had the opportunity and the ability to do the in-person learning, but obviously that sort of created new barriers. But as you say, if you take away some of them barriers because they didn't pre-exist, what you've got now is a plethora of opportunities to be invited to and get access to new opportunities and new ways of thinking, new ways of working, and new qualifications, new jobs because of the change in the landscape. And I think it's quite an interesting point that you make towards that. So I mean, so thank you to all my speakers. I think before we kind of go into question and answers, I wanted to pose a question to you all, and that is in answering today's question around the heart of today's topic, which is technology addressing diversity and social mobility. If I begin with Sir Ken, could technology be a force for good in addressing diversity and social mobility?
Thank you. That was a demonstration of technology working as it should. Obviously, the short answer is yes, but as you've gathered now, I don't do short answers. And you have to look at technology in the several different dimensions. First of all, as Raj has just said, there are lots of ways that you can just enjoy life because of technology. There are things you can do that you couldn't do before. I don't mean the fake news point of Raj's point, but the other side of that coin. And feeling comfortable with your environment and therefore your learning environment is a key piece. And technology clearly plays a role there. And there's a whole lot about the social dimension of technology. But I think in the context of apprenticeships and jobs and wealth creation and so on, the other side of that coin is the one to look at. And that's the competitive advantage side that comes from either understanding technology or applying technology. And if you think, and I hinted at this in my earlier answer, if you think about the range of responsibilities in the tech industry, and when I talk about the tech industry, I mean IT, but obviously the tech industry is much bigger than that. If we take environmental technology, for example, it's an enormous spread. So if you take a look at technology across that spectrum, the kinds of jobs that are available range from the PhD, deep-minded person doing original research into some aspect of technology. This is probably not a fair spectrum, right the way through to somebody in my old stamping ground, the marketing department, who's working out how to communicate what that technology can do to the advantage of customers and salespeople and so on, etc., along that spectrum. So there's an enormous spectrum. So when we talk of tech, we often think of geeks and programmers and so on. That's one slice. But there's this enormous spread of opportunity. The tech industry, the IT industry, is growing enormously quickly as we speak, as is the environmental science technology industry growing enormously quickly. So it would be a strange decision to take a job, an early stage job, although people are welcome to do this, in oil and gas, for example, which is reducing, becoming more efficient, lowering the headcount, etc., when you could be in anywhere of those other two industries. And if they explode in the same way that IT has exploded in my lifetime, then all it will do is suck in opportunities. So remembering I started out as a gap student, well, I started out learning coding because I didn't want to go cross-country running. I started out as a gap student for IBM between school and university. And 50 years later, I'm still in the technology industry. None of the things we do now were imaginable way back when I started. Possibly, actually, that's not true. Science fiction writers imagined them, and only weird people read those, so we paid no attention to it. But real people had no idea of concepts of mobile phones or iPads or so on. So if you say, in my career lifetime, we've gone from plug boards, and we use wires to program card sorting machines, to the land of iPad and mobile phones, and you say, if you're a young person now, leaving school, starting a career, think where technology will be in 50 years' time. And it's impossible, or maybe not impossible. I couldn't have imagined it, and I certainly can't now. But it's almost unimaginable. But it will be transformational. So grabbing the slipstream of that industry makes lots of sense. That's IT, and as I say, that's only one slice of technology. So yes, there's a social dimension, which is very helpful. There's the learning dimension, which Tamsin has spoken about, which is really, really key. There's the mental health dimension of supporting. Again, Roy's talked about this, and it's in his job title. But in my livery company, the Information Technologists Livery Company, so we're a modern city livery company compared to, say, the Weavers, who got their Royal Charter in 1105 or some, which isn't a time, is a date. But in my livery company, we've been involved in trying to connect the different dots we're talking about on this call of young people, training resources, infrastructure, mobile phone providers for network coverage, hardware providers. It's all there to be done. This is like a set of components in a recipe that, when brought together and baked, will make something which is phenomenal. So I mean, I am wildly enthusiastic for two reasons. One is it's been very good to me as an industry and as a path. But secondly, it's so interesting. Whether you're a geek or a marketing salesperson at the other end of the spectrum, there's a role in this fast-growing sector, and it's a global sector. So people that turn their back on it are missing a point, because they think it's all about programming or whatever it happens to be. And I think if we take that attitude of what does the world offer, where might I personally as a young person be in 10 and 20 and 30 years, rather than what microaggression really upset me yesterday, if we raise our sights and look at that opportunity, the world is every young person's oyster.
Yeah, that's a good point, that is. Lord Knight, your thoughts on that? Quick technology being a force for good in addressing diversity and social mobility.
My answer to that is probably. There are some choices for us to make. It feels like we're at a moment where all the preconditions for some significant innovation and change exist, but we still have to choose to make those changes. And if I think about teaching and learning in schools, the opportunity is there to use technology strategically to free up teachers to have more time to do the human and the core job of the human interaction that I think can particularly help those that are most disadvantaged, including those from ethnic minorities, as an example, so that they're given more encouragement, more role models, more mentoring in order to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that are there that Ken's talked about. Beyond schooling, I would then also say it excites me that there are now new ways, thanks to technology, of being able to assess the potential of talent and what people can do apart from just qualifications, which are kind of a clumsy proxy for the potential of people. And the road to acquiring qualification can sometimes be a rocky one for people of disadvantage. I currently am involved in a new coding school. This one is software engineers, sorry, Ken, but where you don't have to have any prior attainment to apply. You play a game on a browser for 3 to 4 hours, and that assesses your cognitive potential. And then you can enroll in a coding school that produces full stack software engineers with 100% employability rate, average starting salaries of 50,000 euros, and it's free, over 2 years, really exciting opportunities that are open to anyone. And you don't have to have the qualifications. That kind of thing just excites me immeasurably because it's opening up opportunity.
That's Founders 01, is it, if I'm correct?
That's Founders 01, yeah. We're opening our first one in London, but we've got places all around the world, in Kazakhstan, in France. The first one in Africa is opening in Cape Verde, in Estonia, Israel.
Quite an interesting point to that. We was when that was announced, we put the question out that could places of worship, could places of youth centres have access to it? And it just shows that the gap can be bridged quite easily now because of how good access to it. I mean, Tamsin, obviously, you know, obviously this is part of your day-to-day work, but that question to yourself.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely, kind of agree with what you guys have said as well. I think there's a danger with technology as well, so it's just like being aware of that in terms of kind of education and making sure if we're building products to solve a big world, you know, a big national issue, it doesn't always fit into that kind of like it's the tech platform that does X for X, you know, and thinking kind of with inclusion kind of at the forefront of our minds when we're creating products so that everyone can access, you know, it is more accessible for all young people. And I guess the concern with technology is then by its kind of nature to be scalable and to solve this big problem, it might not take into kind of account that human element and those individual needs of different people. So I think it's just being aware of that and making sure technology is in the right hands, and then absolutely can be used for a force for good, I believe. But I think the others have answered it really well as well, so don't have much to add.
Of course. Raj.
Yeah, so technology certainly can help, as I said, you know, because you've got the analytics piece, which probably identifies engagement, progress, and attainment of individual learners, at least the trajectories of travel in terms of how they are learning. And so we are big advocates of flipped blended, where the tutor provides the absolute support and hand-holding that is necessary, whilst giving that independent space. So some of the barriers of be it work, be it life, be it, you know, people's lack of confidence or language abilities or whatever. So people feel a bit more confident to learn at their own pace, space, and time at a place that it suits them, to build that confidence, but yet know that the analytics will pinpoint to the support needs they need from the human element side of things to offer that encouragement, hand-holding, and tutorage, if you like. So technology does definitely has a part, but as Tamsin said, one size doesn't fit all, but we are trying using technology to meet the widest possible segment within society. So there are people who might have other learner needs, you know, learning special needs and so on. So technology can bring in that additional element of meeting those needs, which perhaps even in a real life scenario that you cannot meet every one of those needs because there's only one tutor and one classroom position. But with technology, you've got accessibility issues that can be addressed to enable that learning available on demand, if you like, perhaps to the widest possible society as possible. So technology certainly can be very useful in that context.
Super. Well, I'm going to go to question and answers. I know we don't have much time left, but I want to go to question and answers. Those who are participants of this particular room, so there's about 23 of you in this particular one, you are able to answer. You can actually type in the chat box. Those who are in the stream, what you need to do is potentially just send me a message, or it will come to me. And if you've got any questions that way, then I can. Unfortunately, you can't put it into the chat box, but if you do have it, just send me an email or a message, and I will be able to answer it directly like that. So, hot topic. We've got. And I want to pose this to the teacher, and I want to pose this to the. I want to pose this to actually Tamsin and to Lord Knight as well. Should mobile phones be banned in schools? Because it's a hot topic. I think it's a good time to ask this question. Lord Knight, let's begin with yourself, because I know you're passionate about this topic.
Yeah, and it's controversial even in my own household, but my sense is, you know, if you've got a thing that you can hold in your hand that is a calculator, it's a reading device, it's a dictionary, it's a thesaurus, it's a whole library. Why wouldn't you want to use that for learning in schools? Now, it is also a weapon of destruction in terms of mental health, and, you know, a cause of bullying, and, you know, it is a tool that some people are using for real. And I remember being at school before you had any of this technology a long time ago, and people used pens to write nasty things about each other in the loos, and that didn't mean that we banned pens. And so my sense is we've got to educate people and to use technology responsibly and discipline them when they fail to do so. And in the end, I guess, I would just want to trust the professionalism of teachers and head teachers to make their own decisions about this. So I don't think I should mandate that every child should have to use mobile phones, but I think it's equally mad for a minister to say, we're going to try and ban mobile phones from schools because they can be used badly. Neither makes sense.
To the fellow former teacher, Tamsin, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm thinking personally, you know, actually, I've got a 3-year-old son, another child on the way. So thinking very personally from a kind of family perspective, me and my husband have already started talking about how we can prevent our son having a mobile phone for as long as possible. And certainly kind of from a teaching background, yeah, I don't know, like in Silicon Valley, you know, the technologists of this world, or the leaders of tech, none of their kids have mobile phones. There's a cultural thing where they try and prevent it for as long as possible. And I think there's something to be said for that around, you know, mental health and learning. And I think definitely in a managed environment in a school or at home, you know, with iPads and things like that, using tech equipment to support students on that learning journey is really valuable. But I think in a school context as a teacher, I would probably have quite welcomed this approach. It is maybe an out there view, but yeah, from being a teacher, it is quite difficult if students are on their phone all the time. I think they can be used positively in the classroom for sure, but it needs to be a very controlled environment in order for that to happen successfully. And that can be another stress for a teacher to be able to have to manage that. So yeah, I'm kind of on the fence on this one.
No, that's good. That's a good point. So Ken, obviously, it's probably a question to yourself from a leadership perspective, but if you were advising government on this and knowing what you know about the power technology can bring, do you think that government should ban mobile phones in schools?
As you said earlier on, I'm chairman of Shaw Trust, and we have a very large Shaw Education Trust with many schools and tens of thousands of children, and a very professional chief executive, Joe Brown, and lots of professionals underneath her who are worried about the pedagogy that Jim was talking about and so on. And I'm totally unqualified to overrule any of them on what they should be doing in their schools, and I'm happy to leave it to the professionals.
It's a very open, honest answer. That's a good one, that is. Tamsin, I've got a question here, which is, does the online application process for prospective apprentices fail minority, ethnic and underserved talent? I think, yeah. So if the speakers...
Sorry, I keep putting myself on mute, it's a nightmare.
It's a habit, I know.
Yeah, so can you just repeat the question again?
So does the online application process for prospective apprentices fail minority, ethnic and underserved talent?
I think it can do, definitely. I think from our experience, a lot of students, that's where they fall down, is in the application process. They want to apply, they've got that motivation to apply for degree apprenticeships, higher apprenticeships, and really aspirational roles at top companies. But without that kind of support at home, or without that cultural capital to kind of ace an interview, they are falling down in the interview stages of those big employers, where they expect those soft skills to be really well developed, and they expect already, you know, to have the students to be kind of at that level where they can communicate really effectively. But the problem is that they just don't have that structure at school or at home in order to support all students to be able to sort of be fully equipped to prepare through the assessment centre process. So yeah, I definitely think more needs to be done to support those students on that journey from education to employment, building in those steps, making those assessment centres really inclusive, removing any barriers to them, and thinking really about the talent and the potential of those students, and yeah, helping them prepare, giving them the necessary steps to really prepare for those interviews so that they can really ace it when the time does come. And I think there's lots more little things, tips that companies can do to sort of support those students before they attend an assessment centre, by providing content, reading content, practice skill sessions, interview practice. if you are able to do that, or you do have resources to do that before, I think that could really help convert those students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds into your process, and make that conversion better for you. Yeah, I don't know, I hope that helps.
And I think that sort of answers the question from Siobhan, which is how do we increase resource for 3% of children without access to technology to help them kind of continue the learning. So yeah, I think help with the interviewing process, kind of, particularly obviously if the resources are given to teachers who are then able to translate the information to students, it's a quite important way of accessing it.
Isa, can I just chip in on that?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, a contemporary point, football. If you are running a football club, what do? You send out scouts. And what do? They look for talent. And what do they do when they see talent? They speak to the young person and ask them questions about their understanding of football, and they ask them to demonstrate their capabilities. And they've developed a system of talent spotting, and then they bring the kids in, and then they train the kids to become world-class footballers. They don't ask the kids what their father did, which school they went to, what their university was, or any of the stuff that we've somehow baked into our recruitment processes in so much of business. Net result is we're not looking for talent, we're looking for someone that's been schooled in how to deal with being interviewed and apply for jobs. That makes no sense at all. And if the employer recognizes that diversity and inclusion is about finding the maximum talent for them to be able to deal competitively against the other institutions with whom they compete, then they're going to look only for talent. If on the other hand, they're just going to tick boxes and bring in people that qualify prima facie with the right social capital and so on, they'll miss out on the talent. Jim gave a great example, didn't he? He said the way we pick the kids to come in to do those coding courses is they basically play games, but they're not playing games, we're looking for the talent. Well, guess what? That's what they do in soccer, that's what they do in the technology space. Why doesn't everybody do that? Why on earth are employers in the 21st century asking stupid questions about history as opposed to about talent?
Quite an interesting point that us as an organization, what we do is we try and work with employers to educate them about what the communities are, who they are, as opposed to you need to do more. Yeah, we know they need to do more, but it's about them understanding what the talent pool looks like before they can actually access them in a similar way, having that scouting mindset. Because if you know what the community you want to target. So particularly from a data perspective, where we come in, where we say, well, actually, this is what the data says about this particular community, but do you actually understand the challenges they face? Do you understand what a young person from a Black or Asian or Romanian or whatever community, what challenges they face when it comes to employment skills? When you understand that, when you're going into the community, then you've got a better way of addressing and using the word they used, scouting the right talent. I want to actually, we've reached 12 o'clock, and I think it's, let's see if we've got any more questions here. We've got, right, I think what I'll do is I'll put a question to you all, and Sir Ken, I'll probably start with yourself here. One final question to you all, and kind of a brief answer to this. If there's one policy, single policy move or change you'd like to see around diversity and social mobility, what would you want it to be?
Social policy, I would like employers for us to have a policy which incentivizes employers to identify and access talent rather than pre-qualifications. And that goes to the education department, obviously, but it goes to BAYS as well. And there are lots of techniques available to do that. They're hard to find. They're not mainstream. It's not what the herd uses. So if we're going to have a policy, it will be to shift the focus on talent and away from pre-qualification.
Lord Knight?
Got a slightly geeky answer, but yeah, I would get rid of GCSEs at 16 to free up that time and that resource. And I would get rid of the way that we norm reference largely the exam results. So you're designing in the idea that a percentage of young people are going to fail those exams, rather than a criteria referenced exam system like a driving test or a music exam, where you're saying, if you're good enough, then you're good enough and you get the grade. Please, can we just do that? It would just really help.
Tamsin?
Oh, I thought I was on mute again, so I'm glad I'm not. Great, yeah. I think it's about building in a culture of success and positivity around futures for young people, similar to what you've just said, but just ensuring that students, you know, if they don't have confidence, we're building in those steps to make sure they do feel more confident to succeed and have the sort of background to at that school to like build those steps in. And you know, when we do this, it does work. Like you've seen when educators have those high standards and positive outcome expectations, high expectations of their students, such as in cases like in Tower Hamlets at Brampton Academy, where they've got higher numbers of students that have gone to Oxbridge than say Eton. And it's really because of those high expectations of those students that have helped those students feel like I can do this, I can, you know, I have got the potential, and they've also sort of mapped out the steps that they need to take. So as long as they're following that, then they can achieve it. It's you know, I think that would be it. Sorry, I could go on and on.
No, super. And lastly, to yourself, Raj, one policy change you'd like to see or move you'd make around diversity, social mobility?
Yes, I think one policy I would like to see is perhaps the advertising of jobs and selection. So, for example, if one were to recruit an overseas national, there is a mandatory requirement in most cases to advertise within Job Centre Plus and other avenues and platforms, which means it's available, the opportunity is available to the widest segment of societies, perhaps. So to perhaps make every job be advertised through a central portal will mean that everybody has access to the same opportunities. It's not that somebody reads a particular newspaper who has access to that particular job advertised there. So that selection criteria could be a more level playing field if there was a policy that all job vacancies, apprenticeship vacancies were advertised through a single portal, regardless of the nature of the role or position.
That's a good point. And I think that's a good point to bring an end to the Q&A and essentially bring the session to a close. Thank you to Sir Ken, Lord Knight, Tamsin and Raj for the fruitful discussion. Thank you to all those who asked questions, and really appreciate you taking your time to share your thoughts. There's so much I'm sure we can talk about this, and I'm sure we've all learned a lot about this topic. Most definitely a lot of note-taking. In terms of what this forum will be next, the honest answer is I don't know. We are in two minds of potentially whether to run an in-person event or keep the digital format. And particularly, most importantly, is whether we can get the right backing to allow us to move forward. Now, this is important where when I send the feedback format, you don't tell me in the feedback form, shall we continue in an in-person, so stick to a virtual environment or do an in-person event? And if you want us to do so, please let us know. Just to mention a big thank you to our sponsors again, Mindful Education, Sitting Girls Foundation, and the Social Mobility Commission, and lastly, all of you who have taken the time out to join us in this room and in the back room as well. Once again, all recordings from today's session will be put up on the forum website, hopefully by the end of this week, and you'll get an email out to mention that. And a feedback form will be out to you shortly. So if you do get an opportunity, please return the feedback form. You will receive a little gift from the Birmingham Crunch Plans. And until then, I hope you all have a fantastic day and week ahead. Please do continue to engage with this conversation afterwards, and engage with our speakers through their various social media platforms. But thank you once again, and hopefully see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.